What's going on, guys? It's me, Zachary Steele, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one, I'm going to go over the players I think you should look to buy low and sell high on ahead of week 3. Really enjoyed week 2. It was a weird week. A lot of players underperformed. I think you'll see a lot of those names on these lists. So basically, I'll go through each position: quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end, and sort of explain to you a couple guys that I've identified on both sides of the coin, being guys I think you should sell high on and guys I think you should look to buy low on this week, and give you some sort of justifications to why I chose them. So starting with the quarterback position, the first guy I think you should look to buy low on is Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's obviously an extremely talented quarterback. Looks to be one of the rising stars in the NFL. But he's had a pretty slow start to the fantasy season this year. But the fact of the matter is he's actually looked good. The touchdowns just aren't falling. He had 2 touchdowns called back to the penalty against the Cowboys this last week, one to Jared Cook and one to Donald Parham. Mike Williams emerging as a clear number 2 option in that offense is actually really promising because it means that he's not going to have to hone in on Keenan Allen. It's going to be a lot harder for defenses to stop this offense. Eckler did Eckler things this last week with 9 catches for, I want to say, 90 yards. There's 9 for 90. Regardless, the Chargers have a really talented offense. They've got 2 really talented receivers and really talented receiving running back. They've got enough talent at the tight end position. This offense is going to not struggle too much throughout the course of the season. This is going to be a really get right game for this team, especially the offense this week against the Chiefs. I expect them to lose this game, but it's going to be a game they're going to have to put up a lot of points in to be competitive. And I don't think Herbert's going to struggle to do that. So I think this is the cheapest you're going to be able to buy Herbert at all season. So if you are weak at quarterback position, Justin Herbert would be a number 1 target this week. Next quarterback I'd be looking to add is Jalen Hurts. Hurts, along with Herbert, was one of those quarterbacks I was really high on coming into drafts this season. And you sort of saw why this last week in what was actually a really horrible game for the Eagles offense. And that's the point of the matter, is that the Eagles were absolutely horrible on offense this week. And I think Jalen Hurts had 190 passing yards. He still ended up with over 20 fantasy points because of the floor he gives you with his rushing ability. And it's hard to find a running back or a quarterback with that kind of floor. And we've seen the upside he has. You saw it week 1 against the Falcons. Jalen Hurts is a really talented quarterback, especially as a runner. He's going to give you those boom weeks and the weeks where the offense doesn't struggle. And even if they do struggle, he's going to do enough on the ground to not hurt you. And coming off of a down game like this, being an unknown sort of at the quarterback position, given that he's relatively new in the league and hasn't necessarily proven himself, I don't think he'll be too expensive for you. And again, if you don't have one of those top tier quarterbacks, I think Jalen Hurts is the guy that's going to finish in the top 8 this season. And I'd be really happy to have him. The next quarterback I'd be looking to buy low on here is Justin Fields. Honestly, there's a good shot he's on your waiver wire, but take a look at him. If he's not on your waiver wire, just go see what the Justin Fields owner has wants for him. Andy Dalton's in all likelihood going to miss the game this week, and I don't think that he's ever going to get the job back from Justin Fields. I know Justin Fields looked like a rookie. He looked like a rookie this last week, but the fact of the matter is he's a really talented quarterback. He can run the ball very effectively, and that's the kind of floor that you really want in your quarterback position, especially for a rookie. And he actually looked okay against the Bengals this last week. Obviously, he made some mistakes, but he still got 10 carries, which is huge because that shows that they're going to use him in the running game. He had Allen Robinson do a crucial drop for him on 3rd in the end zone. There were good things and bad things out of Justin Fields' performance this week, but the fact of the matter is he's going to give you that floor. There's talented receivers around him, and Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney, and I think that he's the guy that I want on my bench. I want to see what happens, and I don't think he's going to be too expensive for you. Then lastly, I went Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill sort of turned things around this last week. I know the stat line didn't show it in terms of the fantasy perspective, but he really racked up yards against the Seahawks secondary. It was really promising to see the emergence of Julio Jones in this offense in week 2. We all know that A.J. Brown's going to have better weeks. He had 4 drops this last week, and that's simply not going to happen probably ever again this season. And Julio Jones showing that he's still got some Julio left in him is really promising. Julio had over 100 receiving yards, and he definitely got robbed of the touchdown. And in a world where the Titans threw for the 3 touchdowns in their comeback rather than running them in with Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill wouldn't even be on this list at all. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Tannehill was certainly capable of getting those touchdowns himself with the way that offense was moving. he's clearly got two elite wide receivers and an elite running game, so defenses are going to have a hard time picking their poison. And Ryan Tannehill's going to have better games ahead of him, and I'd be really excited about having him as a low-end quarterback one the rest of the season, and he's going to be dirt cheap. The two quarterbacks I'll sell high on are Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins. I'll sort of lump them together here just because they're putting up really quality fantasy performances in terms of yards and touchdowns, but the fact of the matter is neither one of them offers anything on the ground, and it's really hard to be consistently good at the quarterback position in fantasy football without a rushing floor. Neither of these two really has that, and I would be shocked if they continue putting up points at the pace they are. The Vikings are a team that we all know wants to run first if they can. Obviously, their defense is struggling really heavily, so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep up, but they don't want to do that the whole season, and Derek Carr is on an ungodly pace right now. I don't think he's going to be able to keep that up. I think when Josh Jacobs comes back, they're going to try to run the ball a little bit more. The touchdowns are going to slow down. I'm really happy for Derek Carr. He's really surprised me this year. I do think that he's going to be a fringe top 15 quarterback for the rest of the season, but he's definitely not somebody that I would count on to be a starter each week. So both these guys are great streaming options, but the way they're performing right now makes it look like they could be top 12 the rest of the season, and I simply don't think it's going to happen. So if you can trade them for somebody, in all likelihood, they're your backup quarterback, and there's probably somebody in your league that would use them as a starter. So just go take a look and see what they'll offer you for them. If you can get any sort of starter for them, I would do it. Moving on to the running back position, one of my buy lows that might be a shocker for you guys here is Tony Pollard. I say he's a shocking buy low because he's coming off of the best game of his career. He finished with 13 rushes for over 100 yards, and he had a rushing touchdown as well as several receptions. Straight up, Tony Pollard is the best running back in Dallas right now. It's really clear whenever he gets the ball, they're a more explosive offense than when Zeke has it, and it's only a matter of time before he gets more and more carries in this offense. I do think it's going to take longer than it should because there is the contract situation hanging over Zeke, so it's just really hard for management and the coaching staff to admit that their backup running back is better than the guy they're paying $90 million, but he's going to take over the lead role in Dallas, and he's either on your waiver wire or on somebody's bench right now. And he's got legitimate RB2 upside without a Zeke injury, and with a Zeke injury, he's a top 5 running back in your league. So he's a guy that I definitely want on my roster. He's a guy that is not going to cost you very much, and once you have him, you can play him every week. And as he becomes more and more prominently involved in this offense, it's going to get even better. And if anything were to happen to Zeke, Tony Pollard could win your league single-handedly. So go get Pollard. Do pretty much whatever you have to do to get him. He's going to be awesome the rest of the season. I'm all in on Tony Pollard the rest of the season. Next guy I'm looking to buy low on here is Antonio Gibson. Last Thursday, a lot of people freaked out seeing J.D. McKissic have the better fantasy performance, but the fact of the matter is Antonio Gibson's getting far more work right now than J.D. McKissic. Last season, Antonio Gibson's was in on about 46% of the snaps over the course of the season and still finishes RB13. He's now playing about 64% of the snaps. That should tell you something. He's getting more usage than he did last year. He should have a better fantasy finish than he did last year, all things equal. He's not doing that right now because he hasn't found the end zone. He's going to start finding the end zone. He's actually being a lot more involved in the passing game. I know it doesn't look like it given what happens with J.D. McKissic in the 2-minute drill, but they're using Antonio Gibson on first and second down in the passing game. And that's really huge because they weren't very much last season, and he is getting more third down work than he did last year. There's a lot of promising signs with Antonio Gibson, and it's just you're not seeing the output yet, but it's going to come. Antonio Gibson's going to be a top 10 running back the rest of the season, and I think you can get him for a mid RB2 price right now, and I would be really happy to get him. I would happily trade Joe Mixon for him. You could probably trade David Montgomery for him. You could probably trade Chris Carson for him, and I would do all those trades in a heartbeat. Really similar stuff with Jonathan Taylor. A lot of people are worried about seeing Nyheim Hines on the field so much. Then Marlon Mack got some work this week. And Jonathan Taylor hasn't necessarily performed this year yet. But what's most promising is that he leads the NFL in red zone carries with 12, and he has 0 touchdowns on that. That's not going to continue. Jonathan Taylor is going to find the end zone. They played a really tough Rams defense this week, and they really struggled week 1 against the Seahawks defense. Better days are ahead for Jonathan Taylor and the Colts offense. They play the Titans this week. It should be a great get-right opportunity for that offense, even with or without Carson Wentz. Jonathan Taylor will find the end zone this week in all likelihood. And once he does, the fear of him being a bust this season is going to shake off, and he's going to be right back to being a top 10 running back in terms of trade value. And you can probably get him for a little bit cheaper than that right now. And I'd be really happy to have him on my roster. Miles Sanders is another buy low for me. He had a really rough week this last week just because he was an Eagle and all of the Eagles did. A lot of people are worried about Kenneth Gainwell stealing snaps, and I agree that's a concern. But the fact of the matter is he's still in on over 60% of the snaps. He is the clear-cut running back one in Philadelphia, and an offense that I think is going to have better days than they did this last week. A lot of people were worried about Jalen Hurts stealing rushing opportunities from Miles Sanders, but the fact of the matter is when you have a running quarterback, the read option really opens up the opportunity for the running back to be a more efficient running back with the carries he does get, because defenses have to respect the fact that Jalen Hurts can keep the ball. So even though the volume might go down for Miles Sanders, I think you're going to see the efficiency tick up. I wouldn't be shocked if you see a couple 11 carry, 100-yard, and a touchdown games out of him over the next several weeks. Miles Sanders is a really talented running back. He's very in open space. They are using him in the passing game some. Kenneth Gainwell is obviously stealing some of that, but Miles Sanders is going to be a locked-in running back to the rest of the season, and I think a lot of people are worried about him right now. And then lastly, James Robinson I have as a buy low. You saw him be significantly more involved in terms of snap share this week than in week one. James Robinson is clearly the number one running back in terms of talent in that offense, and that's an offense that's really desperately lacking talent. As the season goes on, they're going to have to realize they've got to get him the ball as much as they can. They got to use him as a receiver a lot more than they currently are. James Robinson is extremely talented in the receiving game and the rushing game. Carlos Hyde being on passing downs makes absolutely no sense. It's going to stop if they have any sense in them, and James Robinson is going to be able to be a running back too the rest of the season. I think a high-end running back too. And I think a lot of people are worried about him. I'm not. I will happily start James Robinson every week. I get it. The offense is brutal right now, but it should only improve if Trevor Lawrence gets his feet. And just the fact of the matter is James Robinson is talented. I want talented players on my roster because good things will come from their talent. Moving into the sell highs, the running back position, I'll lump these two together, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Both of them had really quality fantasy games this last week. Zach Moss found the end zone twice and Singletary found it once. The fact of the matter is that for me personally, if they're both active, neither one is usable. I don't expect this to be an offense that has 3 rushing touchdowns very often, and if they do, I bet Josh Allen has 2 of them. It's going to be really hard to predict which one of these two has a good week if either one of them even does each week. They did get beat up on an all-Dolphins team that simply couldn't score this week, so there was a lot of rushing opportunity for these two, but I don't think that's something that's going to happen very often. This is a very, very pass-heavy offense with a quarterback that also steals rushing opportunities from the running backs. This will probably be the highest combined point total between Devin Singletary and Zach Moss over the whole season, and I think that if I could trade either one of them for a player I can reliably start, I wouldn't be shocked if you can trade Devin Singletary for Tony Pollard right now, and I would do that in a heartbeat. Tony Pollard is going to be leagues better than either one of those two the rest of the season, and I would be so ecstatic to make that trade. And then the last sell high for me here is Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette's currently seeing about 60% of the snaps in this offense. I believe the real number is 57%, and that's a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's going to be really hard to predict which of these running backs you want to use each week. Sort of the same scenario like you have in Buffalo. Ronald Jones is a talented running back. He's going to get usage. Giovanni Bernard's going to steal passing opportunities. And you just saw the Buccaneers score 48 points, and Leonard Fournette was still barely a running back too. I think it's about his ceiling, barring a touchdown. I think if the running backs in Tampa Bay, the one that's going to find the end zone the most often is Ronald Jones. So I don't think Leonard Fournette's a guy I'm really comfortable starting each week. And he's been involved enough that I think that he has some trade value, and he's definitely got name value associated with him. So if you can trade him for a low-end running back too, you can package him with somebody for James Robinson, I would do it. Just if you have Leonard Fournette, I would look to move him. I don't think he's going to be very consistent throughout the course of the season. He's had a decent start to the season, so I'd definitely move him if possible. So at wide receiver, a buy low for me is Stephon Diggs. Obviously, he had a pretty meh week 1 and then followed that up with a pretty mediocre week 2. The air yards are there for Stephon Diggs. He's getting a lot of targets down the field. He's clearly the number 1 receiver in Buffalo. There's rumblings that Josh Allen seems to be regressing with his accuracy. I'm not worried about that yet. It's just been 2 weeks. They played tough defenses each of the first 2 weeks in Pittsburgh and Miami. The Bills are a really talented team. They've got really talented receivers and an extremely talented quarterback. And Stephon Diggs is the most talented player on that team right now. Stephon Diggs is going to have a great season. He's still, for me, a top 3 receiver behind Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams. And he hasn't really performed up to that yet. And I think that you can get him at a little bit of a discount because people are worried about how he's performed so far. And I would happily scoop him up at pretty much any price. Another receiver I'm looking to buy low on is Devonta Smith. It's kind of a theme here with these Eagles players. They had a really horrendous week of offense this last week, but Devonta Smith still leading this team in targets by a large margin. He's extremely talented. He's getting open often. He's definitely a down the field threat. Better days are ahead for this Eagle offense. I think Devonta Smith's going to be a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season, and I don't think he's going to cost you all that much. I recently sent out an offer in one of my leagues to try and trade Miles Sanders for Devonta Smith and Tony Pollard. I am very much hoping that trade gets accepted. I'm really high on Devonta Smith and Tony Pollard. I think Devonta Smith is going to be an extremely talented player the rest of the season, have a great career, and I'd be really happy to have him on my roster. I'm looking to buy low on Allen Robinson. After a very mediocre week 1, he followed that up with an even more mediocre week 2 that was saved by a touchdown. The Bears only threw the ball had 16 completions this week. There's a lot of uncertainty around their quarterback position during the game and now with Andy Dalton leaving the field due to injury and then coming back in and then going back out. Again, better days are ahead for this offense. I think that once you got a full week of Justin Fields getting acclimated to this offense, you're really going to see this offense start moving the ball a lot better. And they play a Browns defense this week that's actually been pretty bad in pass coverage. So I think Allen Robinson is going to have a good opportunity to get right this week. And he's one of those receivers that once he does get right, he's not going to be cheap ever again because he's got the name. We know he has the talent and he's got the production over the years. He's going to put it up this season. He's going to be a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, and he has not performed up to that yet. Another buy low for me is DK Metcalf. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's still in the show in Seattle right now. I believe he's second in the NFL in receiving yardage right behind Deebo Samuel. DK Metcalf to me is still the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Came out he's dealing with a bone bruise in his knee. It's nothing to be concerned about. He's going to be fine. He's still a freak athletically. And they play the Vikings this week, who we all know can't guard anybody. This game's going to be a shootout, and I won't be shocked at all if DK Metcalf has more than 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's not going to be cheap, but I think this is the cheapest he's going to be all season. He's going to break out this week, and I want to get him before he does. And then lastly, I've got Kenny Golladay on here. I was pretty low on Kenny Golladay coming into the season, and these first 2 weeks have sort of shown why. But the fact of the matter is, this Giants offense actually looks a little bit better than I thought it was going to. And Golladay is getting the targets. They just haven't quite materialized into fantasy production yet. But that's been a mixture of Golladay being bad and Daniel Jones being bad. Better days are ahead for Golladay, and I think this is about as cheap as you can get him for. I bet you can trade a low-end flex option for him. I bet you could trade Sterling Shepard for him, who I'll talk about later. And I would happily trade Sterling Shepard for Kenny Golladay. Kenny Galladay's got the most upside, and that's the kind of guy I want on my roster. Sterling Shepard's a nice flex now and then, but if either one of these has wide receiver 2 upside the rest of the season, it's Kenny Golladay. And I think Kenny Golladay might have a shot at actually having a quality rest of the season, and he's not going to be any cheaper than he is right now. So then 3 receivers I'm looking to sell high on. Number 1 being Marquise Brown. Obviously, he's had a tremendous start to the season. I believe he's wide receiver 6 or 7 on the season right now. But the fact of the matter is he's doing that without Rashad Bateman in the offense, which is a big we don't know how he's going to look when Bateman's inserted into the offense. And on top of that, we're really not seeing much usage out of Mark Andrews in this offense, which I expect to regress. And then also he's got a touchdown in 2 straight weeks. This last week, he had the jump throw from Lamar Jackson. I don't necessarily want to count on touchdowns for production. He's going to decrease in his production, obviously. He's not going to be putting up 22 plus points per game, but he's got the name value associated with him, and he's played on primetime twice now, so people have definitely watched him succeed. So he's going to be a guy that members in your league will have seen succeed and will be intriguing to them when you send him in trade offers. And I think you can get an RB2 or a wide receiver 2 for him. I don't really think he's going to be that the rest of the season. I think he's a nice flex option, but I think you can get more out of him than that. Then I'd be looking to sell high on Sterling Shepard. Obviously, he's getting a insane amount of targets. He's been very efficient with those targets, but I simply don't think he's got enough upside to be really extremely usable the rest of the season. Like I said, I would happily trade him for Kenny Golladay. We don't know what this offense looks like when Evan Ingram comes back. I think he's going to steal a lot of the targets that Sterling Shepard's getting. And I also would expect Kadarius Toney to get more involved in this offense. I think you're going to see less and less targets go Shepard's way, and he needs every one of those targets to be fantasy relevant. Then I'd also be looking to sell high on Ja'Marr Chase. He has 2 50-yard touchdowns this season, and outside of that, he really hasn't done much. Joe Burrow hasn't done much this season yet to really show me that he's taken a step forward. He had 3 interceptions on 3 straight plays against the Bears. Ja'Marr Chase is a talented receiver. Joe Burrow is going to be an okay quarterback in the NFL, but I think that Ja'Marr Chase has the name value associated with him. He's got the draft pedigree associated with him that you can really capitalize on those 2 big play touchdowns. We saw Tyler Boyd get involved in this offense this last week. I just think it's not going to be an offense that's good enough to support 3 receivers. I still want to own T. Higgins in this offense. And I think Tyler Boyd's got the safest floor, so I do think Ja'Marr Chase can ultimately be the odd man out. And I would sell high on him while you can. The tight end position, I'd be happy to buy low on Mark Andrews. He's got about 16 fantasy points on the season. He's been largely uninvolved, but he's a perennial top 6 tight end. He'll be a top 6 tight end this season, maybe 7 if Gronk keeps up what he's doing. But he's a top 12 tight end. He's extremely startable. He's reliable, and I want him on my roster, and he just hasn't done much yet. I'd also be looking to buy low on Dallas Goedert. It came out this week that Zach Ertz is dealing with COVID. He'll still probably be available for this week's game, but really, I just think that more and more Zach Ertz is getting phased out of this offense, and Dallas Goedert is clearly more talented. I do think that Jalen Hurts will be able to support a quality offense this season, and I think that Dallas Goedert is going to be a guy that might flirt with double-digit touchdowns this season, and I'd be really happy to have him as my tight end. Like I said, there are about 6 or 7 tight ends you can trust, and I think Dallas Goedert is just outside of that range, but he's got enough upside that he's worth taking a stab at. And then lastly, George Kittle, back-to-back bad weeks where Deebo Samuel sort of led the receiving corps, but we all know who George Kittle is. He's very talented. He's got top 3 upside for sure. He's got tight end 1 upside. We've seen him do it. And I don't think he'll be all that expensive. I think if you could trade a Gronk and a starting wide receiver for Kittle, I would do it because the upside's there. He's going to have better game, but he's a guy that can certainly just win you your week and win you your league when he gets going. There aren't really any tight ends to sell high on because if you have a good tight end, nice, keep them. Because not very many people do. So, yeah. So with that, that'll be it for this week's buy low and sell high. Really love making these videos. Trades are definitely my favorite thing to do in fantasy. If you guys are having a rough go so far, if you're sitting at 0-2, just know that you're always one trade away, one waiver move away from improving your team and getting going. I won my home league last year and started out 0-2. You hear stories all the time about teams that start out 0-4 and come back and win their league. But you just got to stay active. Always be looking on which players you can look to add to improve your roster, whether that be through waivers or through trades. And trades are fun too. They're super fun for me. They're what helps keep me interested Tuesday through Saturday. So yeah, if you guys like this video, please be sure to like the video, subscribe. You can go follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll link that in the description. If you've got any trade questions you want to ask me, got any trade offers on the table that you're unsure of, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll give you my input on them. Love helping you guys out. It's always fun to see what trade offers are floating out around there. And yeah, please do take the time to subscribe if you haven't already. I've got a relatively outrageous goal of reaching 500 subscribers by the end of the season. It probably won't happen, but let's do our best. Let's see what we can do there. It means a lot to me. So thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to watch the video, and have a great rest of your day.